Hello, welcome back to part 3 of Feeding for Performance. In this part we're going to look at some strategies. Pre-exercise nutrition, very important. To get your pre-exercise nutrition right. If you don't, you can end up suffering from stomach cramps, or during the event itself or the training session you get a sugar low and you end up not being able to finish the session off properly. So pre-exercise nutrition, some examples of what you might think about eating. 3 to 4 hours pre-event. A lot of people can stomach quite a reasonable amount of food, but like any of these things, make sure you always try them out in practice before you try them in a competition. There's been lots of people who ended up just trying something new just before a competition, myself included, unfortunately, many years ago, and I ended up realising that they'd made a big mistake. So make sure you try everything out before competition day. Never try anything new out on the day of a competition. Always train your food as well as training your body. So examples of suitable 3 to 4 hours pre-event meals might include something like toast, baked beans, scrambled eggs. You get a bit of carbohydrate, get a bit of protein in there. Cereal and milk. Baked potatoes with something like a bolognese sauce. You could have pasta or rice type dish with tomato sauce. Sandwiches and soup, followed by fruit salad or something like ice cream. So again, reasonable, what could be counted as a meal, and try them first. Make sure that your stomach can actually cope with eating this sort of thing 3 to 4 hours before training. If it can, then it can probably do it before competition as well. So just before then, so maybe 1 to 2 hours before, something that's maybe, you look at things here that are slightly more simple, easier to digest, aren't going to sit in your stomach for as long, are going to have less protein, less fats in them. So something like sports drinks potentially, fruit smoothies, milkshakes, fruit itself, fresh or tinned, cereal, potentially cereal bars. Again, with some of these, be careful of the amount of carbohydrates in them, be careful what's in them. Cereal bars can also be full of things like nuts, which aren't so easy to digest, which can cause certain problems for people. Sweets, sports gels and bars. Again, be careful of some of the bars, some of them are quite heavy in calories. Thing you need to remember about a lot of these things, good teeth cleaning is appropriate for most of them. We've got sports drinks and sweets here, but even things like smoothies can be very high in fruit acids, so be careful of your teeth. So make sure you drink lots of amounts of water afterwards, and we'll have a look about how to look after your teeth later. So be careful of it, too much sugary stuff that may cause dental decay. After exercise then, so nutritional strategies sort of between or after exercise. Protein and carbohydrate together is thought to increase the recovery time. So you'll get much better recovery if you have a mixture of carbs and protein. Intake of these foods needs to be as soon as possible after training or competition to maximise what we call here window of opportunity. So immediately after exercise is a window of opportunity to aid your recovery by consuming carbohydrates and protein. Personal plans that have been practiced are crucial. So again, it's a good thing to try to practice these, practice what works for you. Practice what type of foods you can eat. It's not everybody can just eat anything after training. Quite often people don't feel at all hungry after training. They may be happy to take a drink, but not happy to take any solid foods because it can make them feel ill or whatever. So you need to practice these things as well, and introduce solid food slowly after training, and gradually, little bits at a time, and then practice that over time and increase it as time goes on. A graph often used in PE lessons, sports science lessons throughout the land. Cost on 1995 here, looking at 3 bouts of exercise, 3 2-hour bouts of exercise over sort of a 72-hour period. So on day 1, or in 0 hour, on the right hand side, okay, we've got time along the x-axis along the bottom, and we've got muscle glycogen levels along the y-axis going up from bottom to top. And you can see that the training bouts are the little black squares. So the person starts off on the 2 hours and they do a 2-hour session, usually quite strenuous, so you were looking 70+% VO2 max. So a fairly hardish training session over 2 hours. And you can see immediately that glycogen levels start to drop. Okay, so leg These are more likely probably leg glycogen, so the glycogen levels start to drop immediately in the body. So we get a big drop over those 2 hours. Now, we've got two types of diet. We've got a high carbohydrate diet and a low carbohydrate diet being consumed by these test subjects. And you can see that after 2 hours, there's not much difference, okay? So pre-exercise start, there's not much difference between the low carbohydrate diet and the high carbohydrate diet in terms of starting point or end point after that first 2 hours. Where we do see a difference is, though, over the next 24 hours, the people with the low carbohydrate diet, because they're not getting carbs into themselves quickly because their diet's low in carbs, they're missing that window of opportunity. The high carbohydrate diet, though, we're taking the carbs on immediately and we're getting this, what we call this window of opportunity. So if you look at the dotted line, you can see that the gradient in the line changes over the 24-hour period between exercise bouts. Initially there's a rapid increase followed by a slower increase in carbohydrate uptake back into the muscle to reform muscle glycogen. The gradient in the second half of both the dotted line and the solid line are roughly about the same. It's that initial gradient that's missing out. And if you miss out that initial window of opportunity of getting carbohydrates on board, you miss that initial rapid replenishment of glycogen levels. At that stage, there is a real hunger in the muscle to replace its glycogen content. So there's an increase in enzyme activity in the muscle, glycogen synthetase, and as we start to increase our carbohydrate intake, our blood sugar increases, our insulin levels goes up. The permeability of the muscle is there to get glycogen or get glucose into the muscle. The insulin's encouraging the muscle to take up glycogen. There's those glycogen forming enzymes in the muscles that have increased because of the exercise and the low glycogen levels. And it's all set up to have this window of opportunity for us to get glucose from the blood into the working muscle. So our high carbohydrate diet here is allowing us to do that, where our low carbohydrate isn't. So we're getting this initial rapid high levels of glycogen being put down. And if we miss out on that, then we don't have complete recovery in the 24 hours. If we add that a factor of a low carbohydrate diet, that means it's going to get even worse. So by day 2 and the start of the second 2 hour block, it means that the low carbohydrate diet person has now got nearly half the amount of carbohydrate available in the muscle as the person who had the high carbohydrate diet, which means they're starting off their exercise session at a lower level. Both deplete about the same amount again in that session. So session 2, 24 hours later, our 2 hour bout again of reasonably high intensity aerobic exercise, where both people on the high carbohydrate and the low carbohydrate are again burning off about the same amount of muscle glycogen. The recovery process then happens again, and again we see the rapid phase being uptaken by the high carbohydrate diet person, but not so much by the low carbohydrate diet. By the next 24 hours then, our low carbohydrate person is down nearly to just over 40 millimoles per litre per kilogram wet weight muscle. So very low levels of muscle glycogen now available to them, whereas our high carbohydrate diet person has got nearly the same amount of muscle glycogen as they had in week 1. If we now go to day 3, okay, on our third exercise bout of 2 hours, we can now see that actually even over that 2 hours, the person with the low carbohydrate diet is not actually able to use as much carbohydrates. So we could actually assume that because that line is shorter and they've used less carbohydrates in that third session, they're probably not able to maintain the pace as well in that third session, okay, because their muscle glycogen has dropped that much. So their per millimole of carbohydrate per kilogram, or per millimole per kilogram of carbohydrate wet weight is now down to a very, very, very low level, to the point where it's probably going to have slowed them down and they're not able to have used much carbohydrate over that session. Whereas our high carbohydrate diet person is able to use the same amount as they did on day 1. And again, this would keep on happening until eventually our low carbohydrate diet person is not going to be able to maintain any sort of exercise intensity by the time we get to the 4th or 5th exercise session of the week. So it's crucial that we do two things. One, we make sure we have a high amount of carbohydrates, and two, we get them into us very quickly after those exercise bouts. Or by day 3, day 4, day 5, we're not going to have carbohydrate there to actually be able to maintain our exercise intensity. Some recovery ideas: shot bought milkshakes. A while back there was a lot in the news about chocolate milkshakes being great for recovery. Remember, all a milkshake basically is milk with a bit of flavouring stuck in it. So, you can make your own fairly easily. So skim milk with flavouring. Okay, if you're into chocolate, then a bit of chocolate flavouring in it, and you've got your basically your milkshake. And the good thing about that is there's probably less fat and sugar in it. Some of the shop bought ones are very, very high and very dense in sugars, and there's a lot of things added to them as well, and they tend to have a slightly higher fat content. So your skim milk is going to have the protein, the carbohydrates you're after without the fats, with a wee bit of extra, obviously, probably sugar in the flavouring that you've added in. Chocolate milkshake, I've already said. Drinkable yogurt's another good chance to get protein and carbs into you. Again, just have a look at the labels, make sure that they're low fat varieties, and that they have a reasonable ratio, again about 4 to 1 if possible, of carbs to protein. There's lots of recovery sports drinks out there now. You can get the ones just obviously with the carbohydrate, which would be the traditional ones, but a lot of them are now, the recovery ones are selling them with a ratio of carbs to protein again, and they're adding protein into the recovery drinks. And in fact, some of the sports drinks you see now are also putting some protein into it, even for during exercise. The amount needed will obviously depend on your weight and the requirements and how much exercise you've been doing. So obviously you want to replace the carbohydrates that you've been using, and they add some protein to help that recovery. So drinking a couple of litres of milkshake after a 30-minute session is probably not required. So be sensible about your recovery drinks, because they can add an awful lot of obviously excess calories into your diet if you don't need as much as you're taking. Some more refueling ideas then: 1.5 cups of cornflakes or milk, will give you about 60 grams of carbs. 2 slices of toast with jam will give you about 50 carbs. 2 medium bananas will give you about 50 grams of carbohydrate. 1 Lucozade carbo gel, about 30 grams, and lots of different sort of carbo gels now and recovery gels in the market. 1 bottle, about 500 mils of a sports drink, will give you about 32 grams or so of carbohydrate. There's usually between about 5 to 8 grams of carbohydrate per 100 millilitres in those. 2 pancakes with banana, about 40 grams of carbohydrates. Smoked fruit smoothies with yogurts, again depending on if they're commercial, will vary slightly depending on the amount of added sugar and stuff in them, and whether there's the amount of fat levels in them as well. And obviously all those are also sources of other nutrients, because I've already said there's fat and stuff in them, but also we've got vitamins and minerals and stuff and things like the fruit smoothies. Some of the sports drinks and gels add extra stuff in them. There's obviously vitamins, minerals with the bananas and stuff as well, and the toast. Okay, that's the end of this part, and I'll see you in the next part.